She was clearing tables in the hotel lobby at midnight. She told the billionaire, "Don't travel with your wife tonight." The next morning, a luxury car was outside her humble home. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. when Clara Dawson pressed her calloused palm against the cool marble countertop, steadying herself after another brutal shift. Her feet ached in shoes that should have been replaced 2 months ago, but rent didn't pay itself, and Lily's asthma medication wasn't getting any cheaper. The lobby of the Emerald Heights Hotel gleamed under crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than Clara would earn in a lifetime. She'd been working here for 3 years now, moving through the opulent spaces like a ghost, invisible to the wealthy guests who floated through in their designer clothes and diamond jewelry. That invisibility was her survival. Keep your head down, do your job, collect your paycheck, go home to Lily. Tonight felt different, though, heavier somehow. Clara gathered champagne flutes from a nearby table, the delicate stems slippery in her tired hands. Her shift ended in an hour, 1 more hour, and she could catch the bus home, relieve Mrs. Martinez, their sweet neighbor who watched Lily during these late shifts, and crawl into bed next to her daughter, just 1 more hour. The elevator bank chimed softly, and Clara glanced up out of habit. A woman stepped into the lobby, Olivia Harrington. Clara recognized her immediately. You couldn't work at the Emerald Heights without knowing the Harringtons. Edward Harrington owned half of San Francisco's tech sector, and his wife was a fixture in society magazines, always perfectly styled, always smiling that brilliant white smile. But she wasn't smiling now. Olivia moved toward the windows overlooking the city, her stilettos clicking against marble. She was on her phone, voice low but audible in the quiet lobby. Clara turned back to her task, lifting the tray of glasses. Don't stare. Don't engage. Invisible. Remember, Adrian, my love, tomorrow at 10 o'clock, everything will be resolved. Clara froze. The words sliced through the silence like a blade. She shouldn't be listening. She knew that. But something in Olivia's tone made her blood run cold. The pilot Connor received the payment. Olivia continued, adjusting the diamond necklace at her throat. Her voice dripped with satisfaction. When we cross the Sierra Nevada, there'll be a malfunction in the controls. Edward won't survive. Finally, we'll be free, and we'll have everything. The 200 million, the companies, all of it. Clara's hands trembled so badly that one of the champagne flutes nearly slipped from the tray. She caught it at the last second, her heart hammering against her ribs. This can't be real. This can't be happening. Olivia laughed, a sound so devoid of warmth that Clara felt her stomach twist. 15 years of pretending to love that arrogant man. It was worth it, wasn't it? Tomorrow, I'll be in your arms, rich and free. Clara stood paralyzed, her mind screaming at her to move, to do something, to run. But her legs wouldn't cooperate. She watched Olivia end the call and glide toward the elevators, her elegant figure disappearing behind polished brass doors. The lobby fell silent again. Clara set down the tray before she dropped it. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. What did I just hear? What the hell did I just hear? She gripped the edge of the marble table, trying to think clearly through the fog of shock. A murder plot. She'd just overheard a murder plot. A real one, against one of the richest men in California. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Walk away, Clara. You didn't hear anything. Finish your shift. Go home to Lily, the rational part of her brain, the part that had kept them fed and housed for 3 years, screamed at her to forget this ever happened. She was nobody, a single mother working minimum wage plus tips. Who would believe her if she said anything? Olivia Harrington was untouchable, protected by wealth and lawyers and connections that Clara couldn't even fathom. And if she spoke up, if she got involved, she'd lose this job. The hotel had strict policies about staff bothering VIP guests. They'd fire her on the spot. Then what? How would she pay rent? How would she afford Lily's medication? How would she keep food on the table? Don't be stupid, Clara. You have a daughter to think about. But even as those thoughts circled her mind, another voice whispered beneath them. Quieter, but more insistent, her grandmother's voice. The woman who'd raised her after her parents died. Doing the right thing ain't always the easy thing, baby girl. But it's the thing that lets you sleep at night. Clara thought of Lily, asleep in Mrs. Martinez's apartment right now, trusting that her mother would come home. What would she tell her daughter if, Years from now, Lily found out that Clara had the chance to save a man's life and chose silence instead. What kind of lesson was that? Her hands were still shaking as she looked across the lobby toward the hotel bar. Edward Harrington sat alone at the counter, nursing what looked like scotch. He appeared exhausted, his tailored suit jacket draped over the back of his chair, tie loosened. Even from this distance, Clara could see the weight in his shoulders. He has no idea. He's going to die tomorrow morning. And he has no idea. Clara's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. This was insane. This was career suicide. This was the right thing to do. She took a deep breath, smoothed down her black server's vest with trembling fingers, and forced her feet to move. Each step toward the bar felt like walking through water. Her vision tunneled. The chandelier light seemed too bright. The click of her worn shoes against marble sounded deafening in her ears. Edward Harrington didn't look up as she approached. He was lost in thought, staring into his glass like it held answers to questions he hadn't asked yet. Clara stopped beside him. Her mouth was dry. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Mr. Harrington. He glanced up, irritation flickering across his features. Yes, the words caught in her throat. This was it. The moment that would change everything. She could still walk away. She could still... No more running. Sir, Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, tasting fear and determination in equal measure. Please forgive me for interrupting you, but you can't take that flight tomorrow. You can't go with your wife. Your life is in serious danger. Edward Harrington's expression shifted from irritation to confusion to something harder to read. He set down his glass slowly, studying her with sharp gray eyes that suddenly felt like they could see right through her. I'm sorry, he said carefully, his voice low and controlled. What did you just say? Clara felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes. But she didn't back down. She'd already jumped off the cliff. There was no going back now. Your wife is planning to kill you tomorrow morning, please. You have to believe me. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Impossible to take back. Clara watched Edward Harrington's face shift through a dozen emotions in the span of seconds. Disbelief, anger, suspicion, and something else she couldn't quite name. What are you talking about? His voice was sharp now, cutting. Who are you? I'm just a server here. Sir, I clean tables. I bring drinks. Clara's voice broke. She forced herself to breathe. I heard your wife on the phone just now. She didn't know I was there. She was talking to someone named Adrian. Edward's jaw tightened at the name, but he said nothing. Clara pressed on, the words tumbling out faster now. She said the pilot, Connor, she called him Connor, has been paid. She said when you cross the Sierra Nevada tomorrow morning at 10, there's going to be a malfunction. The controls will fail. She said you won't survive. She and this Adrian person, they're planning to take everything. $200 million, your company's. All of it. She watched the color drain from Edward's face. He gripped the edge of the bar, knuckles going white. That's impossible, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. You must have misheard. You must have... I didn't mishear anything. Clara's hands were trembling so badly she had to clasp them together. She said she's been pretending to love you for 15 years. She laughed about it. She said tomorrow she'd be free and rich and with him. Edward stared at her, and in that moment, Clara saw something crack behind his eyes. Not surprise, exactly. Something worse. Recognition, maybe. Like a piece of a puzzle he'd been trying to ignore had suddenly clicked into place. Why are you telling me this? He asked quietly. You don't know me. You have nothing to gain from this. Clara felt hot tears spilling down her cheeks now. She didn't bother wiping them away. Because I have a daughter. Her name is Lily. She's 8 years old. And if something happened to me, I'd want someone to tell her. I'd want someone to care enough to speak up, even if it cost them something. What could this possibly cost you? Everything. The word came out as barely a whisper. Mr. Harrington, I need this job. My daughter has asthma. The medication costs more than you can imagine. I'm behind on rent. If the hotel finds out I approached you, if anyone thinks I was bothering a VIP guest, I'll be fired. But I couldn't. I couldn't just let you walk onto that plane tomorrow without telling you what I heard. Edward studied her for a long moment. Clara could see him weighing her words, searching for deception, trying to make sense of something that probably sounded insane. A random server approaching him in a hotel bar at midnight with a story about his wife planning to murder him. It was ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. Except it wasn't. "Adrian," Edward said finally, his voice hollow. "Did she say his last name?" "No, sir. Just Adrian." Edward closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were filled with something that looked like grief. "Adrian Pierce, my business partner. We've worked together for 10 years. Clara's heart sank. She hadn't known that detail. The betrayal was even deeper than she'd realized. "I need you to tell me everything," Edward said, his voice steadier now. "Every word you heard, every detail you remember. Can you do that?" Clara nodded and recounted the conversation as precisely as she could, watching Edward's expression grow darker with each sentence. When she finished, he was silent for what felt like an eternity. "Do you believe me?" Clara asked finally, her voice small. "I don't know you," Edward said carefully. "I have no reason to trust you, but—" He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "There have been signs. Small things I told myself I was imagining. Olivia's been distant for months. Adrian's been pushing me to update my will, to make sure everything's in order, just in case. The private jet has needed unusual maintenance recently. Connor mentioned something about the navigation system acting up, but it was supposedly fixed." He looked at Clara with eyes that held too much pain for one person to carry. "Either you're telling me the truth and my wife wants me dead, or you're part of some elaborate scheme I don't understand yet. Either way, I need to know which. I'm not part of anything." "Mr. Harrington, I swear to God I'm just a single mom trying to keep my head above water. I work 2 jobs, I take the bus everywhere, I buy my clothes at thrift stores. I don't have the imagination or the connections to be part of some scheme. Clara's voice cracked again. "I just couldn't live with myself if I said nothing." Something in Edward's expression softened. "What's your name?" "Clara? Clara Dawson. Clara Dawson." He repeated it like he was committing it to memory. "Do you have any proof? Any recording of what you heard?" "No. Sir, I was just cleaning tables. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I was there and she didn't notice me. People like her never notice people like me." Edward nodded slowly, understanding passing across his face. The invisible staff, the servants who blended into the wallpaper. "If what you're saying is true," he said carefully, "then you just saved my life. And if it's true, then coming forward could put you in danger too. Olivia has resources. She has connections. If she finds out you warned me—" "I know," Clara interrupted. "But I'm already in danger, aren't I? If she's capable of murdering her own husband, what would she do to a witness? That's why I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Don't tell anyone it was me, please. Investigate however you need to, but keep my name out of it. I need this job. My daughter needs me. If I lose everything because I did the right thing, I don't know what happens to us." Edward reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, along with a pen. He wrote something on the back and handed it to her. "That's my private number. If anything happens, if anyone contacts you, threatens you, anything, you call me immediately. Do you understand?" Clara took the card with shaking fingers. "You believe me?" "I don't want to," Edward admitted. "God, I don't want to. But yes, something in my gut is telling me you're telling the truth, and I've learned to trust my gut in business. I should have trusted it in my personal life too." He stood up, leaving cash on the bar that was probably more than Clara made in a week. "Go home, Clara. Be with your daughter. I'm going to make some calls. If this is real, I need to act fast and carefully. And I give you my word. Your name stays out of it. You were never here. We never had this conversation." "Thank you," Clara whispered. "Don't thank me yet." Edward's expression was grim. "If you're right, things are about to get very complicated for both of us." He walked away, phone already to his ear, leaving Clara standing alone by the bar. Her entire body was shaking now, adrenaline and fear coursing through her in equal measure. What have I done? What the hell have I just done? She finished her shift in a daze, mechanically cleaning tables, avoiding eye contact with everyone. When midnight finally came, she clocked out, grabbed her threadbare coat from her locker, and stepped out into the cold San Francisco night. The bus ride home felt endless. Clara stared out the window at the city lights, Edward's business card burning a hole in her pocket. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. She'd risked everything, her job, her safety, her daughter's future, on the slim hope that doing the right thing mattered. Please let it matter. Please. When she finally reached Mrs. Martinez's apartment and saw Lily sleeping peacefully on the couch, curls spread across a pillow, Clara felt something inside her break. She scooped up her daughter carefully, whispering thanks to their neighbor, and carried Lily home. In their tiny bedroom, Clara laid Lily down gently and knelt beside the bed, tears streaming down her face. "Forgive me, baby," she whispered. "I might have just ruined everything for us, but I couldn't let that man die. I couldn't." Lily stirred in her sleep, reaching out unconsciously. Clara took her small hand and held it tight. Whatever happened next, she'd done the right thing. She had to believe that. Edward Harrington sat in the back of his town car, phone pressed to his ear, watching the San Francisco skyline blur past the tinted windows. His driver knew better than to ask questions when Edward left the hotel at 1 a.m. with that look on his face. "Robert, I need you at my office now." Edward's voice was steady, but his hand trembled slightly as he loosened his tie. "I don't care if you were asleep. This can't wait." Robert Hale had been Edward's head of security for 12 years. But more than that, he'd been a friend. One of the few Edward had left in a world where everyone wanted something from him. If there was anyone he could trust right now, it was Robert. 20 minutes later, Edward was pacing his office on the 42nd floor of the Harrington Tower while Robert sat across from him. Arms crossed, face skeptical. "Let me get this straight," Robert said slowly. "A hotel server you've never met before approached you at midnight and told you that Olivia is planning to murder you tomorrow morning by sabotaging your private jet." "Yes." "And you believe her?" Edward stopped pacing. "I don't know what I believe, but I can't afford to ignore it either." "Edward, this sounds crazy. You know that, right? It could be a setup. It could be someone trying to create drama, get a lawsuit, shake you down for money. Hell, it could be Olivia herself testing your loyalty for all we know." "It's not." Edward's voice was firm. "You didn't see this woman, Robert. She was terrified. She was crying. She risked her job, a job she desperately needs, to tell me this. Why would she do that if it wasn't real?" Robert studied him carefully. "You said she mentioned Adrian. Adrian Pierce. My business partner." Edward practically spat the words. "According to this Clara woman, he's Olivia's lover. They've been planning this together. That's a hell of an accusation." "I know." Edward sank into his leather chair, suddenly exhausted. "But it would explain things. The way Olivia's been acting lately. The distance. Adrian's been pushing me hard to restructure my will, make sure everything's properly organized. He even suggested I add him as a secondary executor, said it would help with business continuity if anything happened to me." Robert's expression darkened. "When did he suggest that? 3 weeks ago? And the jet maintenance issues?" Edward felt his stomach turn. "Connor mentioned something last month about the navigation system glitching. He said it was fixed. But now," he trailed off, the implications sinking in like stones. "Now you're wondering if it was ever really fixed, or if Connor was setting up tomorrow's accident even then," Robert finished. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over them like fog. "What do you want me to do?" Robert asked finally. "Everything." Edward leaned forward, quietly. "I want Olivia's phone records, her bank statements, any communication between her and Adrian. I want background on Connor Hayes, financial records, debts, anything that might make him vulnerable to bribery. And I want it done before dawn." Robert whistled low. "That's a tall order for a few hours. You've done more with less time." "And Robert," Edward's voice dropped, "if this is real, if my wife really is trying to kill me, I need to know before that flight takes off at 10 a.m. What about Olivia? She's expecting you home tonight, isn't she?" Edward shook his head. "I'll text her. Say I'm staying at the office, working on the merger deal. She won't question it. I do it all the time." The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. How many nights had he chosen work over his marriage, never realizing his wife was grateful for the distance? Robert stood. "I'll need access to your personal accounts, your security clearances, everything. You have it. Whatever you need." Edward pulled out his phone and started typing. And Robert? The woman who told me about this, Clara Dawson. I want someone watching her, discreetly. If this is real, and Olivia finds out she talked, Clara could be in danger. Already on it. Robert headed for the door, then paused. Edward, what if we find out it's true? What then? Edward stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below, lights twinkling like stars. Somewhere down there, Clara Dawson was probably lying awake, terrified she'd destroyed her life by doing the right thing. And somewhere else, Olivia was sleeping peacefully, dreaming of his death and her freedom. Then we make sure justice is served, Edward said quietly. And we make sure that brave woman down there doesn't suffer for her courage. Robert nodded and disappeared into the hallway. Edward was alone with his thoughts, and the ghost of a marriage he'd apparently been living in for years. He thought about Clara's question at the bar. Do you believe me? The truth was, he did. Not because he had proof. He didn't. Not yet. But because everything she'd said aligned with a truth he'd been avoiding for months. Maybe years. The cold silences at breakfast. The way Olivia flinched when he touched her. The increasing time she spent at the spa or with friends. The subtle way she'd been suggesting he fly more often, take more risks, live dangerously. She'd been setting the stage. And Adrian. God. Adrian. His trusted partner. The man he'd built an empire with. Edward wanted to dismiss it as impossible. But he couldn't. There had been moments lately. Small things. The way Adrian's eyes followed Olivia at company events. The expensive gifts he'd given her from both of us for her birthday. The business trips that somehow always aligned with Edward being out of town. How could I have been so blind? His phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. Working late again. Don't forget we have an early flight tomorrow. Connor wants wheels up at 10 sharp. Edward stared at the message. His blood running cold. How casually she mentioned it. How easily she played the role of concerned wife, reminding him to be on time for his own murder. He typed back, wouldn't miss it. The lie tasted like ash, but he needed her to think everything was normal. If she suspected he knew, she might run. Or worse, move up her timeline. Another text came through, this one from Robert. Got a team on the phone records? Preliminary search shows large cash withdrawal from Olivia's personal account 3 days ago. $50,000, working on finding where it went. $50,000. Probably a down payment. Probably just the first installment of whatever they'd promised Connor Hayes to crash that plane into the Sierra Nevada. Edward's hands curled into fists. 15 years. 15 years of marriage. And it had all been a lie. Every smile. Every touch. Every I love you. Mumbled over morning coffee. All of it performance. And he'd been too busy building his empire to notice he was sleeping next to a stranger. No, not a stranger. Something worse. A killer. His phone rang. Robert again. Talk to me, Edward said. You're going to want to sit down for this. Robert's voice was grim. We intercepted Olivia's cell signal. She made a call 20 minutes ago to Adrian Pierce. Edward's throat tightened. And she told him everything went perfectly. That you suspect nothing. That tomorrow at this time they'd be celebrating. Robert paused. Edward, there's more. We found the banking records. $500,000 was transferred from an offshore account, one that traces back to Adrian, to Connor Hayes' personal account. 3 days ago. $500,000. Not 50. $500,000 to murder him. That's not all, Robert continued. I pulled Connor's background. He's got gambling debts, serious ones. Over $300,000 owed to some very unpleasant people in Vegas. That money from Adrian probably saved his life, which means he's desperate enough to go through with this. Edward felt something inside him harden to stone. It was real. All of it. Clara had been telling the truth. What about the jet? I've got a team heading to the hangar now. They'll do a full inspection. If Connor tampered with anything, we'll find it. Good. And Robert? I want Connor picked up before dawn. Quietly. Bring him somewhere secure. I want to hear him confess this himself. Already coordinating with SFPD? We'll have him by 5 a.m. Edward stood and walked to the window again, looking down at the city that would wake up tomorrow to news of a scandal that would shake San Francisco's elite to its core. Somewhere down there, Clara Dawson was probably still awake, worried she'd made a terrible mistake. She hadn't. She'd saved his life, and Edward Harrington never forgot a debt. "Robert," he said quietly, "when this is over, I want you to find out everything about Clara Dawson, her situation, her daughter, what she needs. Everything. Planning to thank her. Planning to make sure her courage doesn't destroy her," Edward replied. "If doing the right thing costs her everything, what does that say about the world we've built?" Robert was silent for a moment. "You're a good man." "Edward? Better than most people realize. We'll see about that." Edward checked his watch. 3:30 a.m., 6.5 hours until that flight was scheduled to take off. 6.5 hours to dismantle his wife's murder plot and face the ruins of his life. "Get me everything by dawn, Robert. By the time the sun comes up, I want enough evidence to bury them both. You'll have it." Edward hung up and stood alone in his office, the city glittering below him like broken glass. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, he had work to do. Dawn hadn't yet broken over San Francisco. When Robert Hale's team moved into position, 3 unmarked vehicles sat in strategic locations around Connor Hayes' modest apartment in Daly City. Engines idling, breath-fogging windows in the pre-dawn chill. Robert sat in the lead car, watching the second-floor apartment through binoculars. Inside, Connor Hayes' bedroom light had just flickered on. The pilot was awake, probably preparing for the flight that would never happen. "All units in position," Robert spoke quietly into his radio. "Remember, we do this clean. No sirens, no scene. The neighbors don't need to know anything happened." 2 SFPD detectives sat in the back seat. Detective Sarah Chen and her partner Detective Marcus Williams. They'd worked with Robert before on sensitive cases involving the city's elite. They knew how to be discreet. "You sure about this, Hale?" Chen asked, her dark eyes skeptical. "We're about to arrest a man based on bank transfers and intercepted phone calls. His lawyer's going to have a field day." "We won't need to worry about lawyers," Robert replied. "Connor Hayes is drowning in gambling debt. When we show him what we have and offer him a way out, he'll talk. And if he doesn't, then we go with what we've got. But trust me, he'll talk. Desperate men always do." At 5:47 a.m., Connor Hayes emerged from his apartment building wearing his pilot's uniform. Carrying a coffee thermos and a leather flight bag, he looked tired, his face drawn. Shoulders hunched against the morning cold. He made it exactly 12 steps toward his car before Robert's team moved. "Connor Hayes." Detective Williams stepped forward. "Badge out. SFPD, we need you to come with us." Connor's face went white. The coffee thermos slipped from his fingers, splashing across the sidewalk. "What? Why, I haven't—" "You can come voluntarily, or we can do this the hard way," Chen said calmly. "Your choice." Connor's eyes darted left and right, looking for escape routes that didn't exist. His hands were shaking. "I want a lawyer." "That's your right." Robert stepped forward. "But you might want to hear what we have to say first. It could save you a lot of trouble." "Connor, maybe even your life." Something in Robert's tone made Connor freeze. "My life? Let's talk somewhere private." Robert gestured toward the unmarked car. "Unless you want your neighbors to see you in handcuffs." Connor looked around at the empty street, then back at the grim faces surrounding him. Whatever fight he'd had drained out of him like water. Okay, I'll come. But I'm not saying anything without— Just get in the car, Connor." 20 minutes later, Connor sat in a windowless interrogation room at a private security facility that Robert's company operated. It wasn't a police station. Technically, Connor hadn't been arrested yet. That gave them flexibility. Connor's leg bounced nervously under the table. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Despite the cool temperature, he'd been silent during the drive, but his body language screamed guilt. Robert entered carrying a folder thick with documents. He set it on the table but didn't open it. "Not yet." "Do you know why you're here, Connor?" "No." The word came out hoarse. "Really? You can't think of any reason why Edward Harrington's head of security would want to talk to you at 6 in the morning?" Connor's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." Robert opened the folder slowly, deliberately. He pulled out the first document, a bank statement with a highlighted section. $500,000. Deposited into your account 3 days ago from an offshore account registered to Adrian Pierce. He slid it across the table. "That's a lot of money for a pilot." especially one who owes $347,000 to some very dangerous people in Las Vegas. Connor stared at the paper, his breathing shallow. We know about the debts, Connor. We know about the threats. We know they gave you a deadline. Robert leaned forward. What we want to know is what you agreed to do for that money. I didn't... Connor's voice cracked. I need my lawyer. Olivia Harrington called you 8 times in the past 2 weeks. Robert continued, pulling out phone records. She visited your apartment twice, once with Adrian Pierce, and yesterday, you received a text from her that said, and I quote, "Everything's set for tomorrow. Don't lose your nerve now. After this, you're free." He looked up. Free from what, Connor? Connor's hands were shaking so badly he had to clasp them together. I can't. You can't what? Can't tell us that you sabotaged Edward Harrington's jet, that you were paid $500,000 to cause a fatal accident over the Sierra Nevada this morning. Robert's voice was steel. Because we already know, Connor. We've got our team at the hangar right now, going over every inch of that aircraft. When they find what you did, and they will find it, you're looking at attempted murder, 1st degree, premeditated. That's life in prison. Connor, life. No, no, no. Connor was rocking now, his face buried in his hands. This wasn't supposed to happen. They said no one would know. They said it would look like an accident, just bad luck, and I could pay off my debts and start over. Who said that? Robert's voice softened slightly. Olivia? Connor nodded, tears streaming down his face. What about Adrian Pierce? Another nod. Connor, look at me. Robert waited until the pilot raised his head. You're in serious trouble, but right now you have one chance to help yourself. 1. You tell us everything. Every conversation. Every detail. Every piece of this plan. And we can work with the DA. You cooperate fully. You testify against Olivia and Adrian. And maybe, you don't spend the rest of your life in prison. But if you don't talk, Detective Chen added from her position by the door, if you try to protect them, they'll throw you under the bus so fast your head will spin. You think Olivia Harrington cares about you? You're a loose end, Connor. The minute this went wrong, you became a liability. Connor was openly sobbing now. I didn't want to do it. I swear to God I didn't want to. But the people I owe money to, they were going to kill me. They said if I didn't pay by Friday, He couldn't finish. So Olivia offered you a way out, Robert said quietly. She knew about the debts. I don't know how, but she knew. She approached me 6 weeks ago, said she had a proposal, said she needed a problem solved, and if I helped her, she'd make my debts disappear and give me enough to start fresh somewhere else. What was the problem? Connor looked up, his eyes red and hollow. Her husband. She wanted him dead. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. She said it had to look like an accident. Said I was the only one who could do it because I had access to the jet. And Edward trusted me. Connor's voice broke. I told her no at first. I told her I couldn't do something like that. But then the guys I owe money to, they sent me a picture of my sister, my little sister, leaving her house in Sacramento. They said if I didn't pay, they'd start with her. Robert felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but he pushed it down. So you agreed. I didn't have a choice. They were going to kill her. There's always a choice, Connor. You just made the wrong one. Robert pulled out another document. What did you do to the jet? Connor wiped his face with shaking hands. The navigation system. I installed a device that would override the controls once we reached a certain altitude over the mountains. It would look like a sudden system failure. The plane would go down, and there'd be nothing Edward could do to stop it. Where did you get the device? Adrian gave it to me. He said he had connections, people who could build something untraceable. He walked me through the installation, made sure I did it right. Connor looked sick. He was so calm about it, like we were discussing a business transaction, not murder. Robert exchanged glances with Chen. This was bigger than they'd thought. Adrian hadn't just funded the plot. He'd engineered it. When did you install the device? 2 days ago, during the routine maintenance check. No one else was there. It took me 20 minutes. And Olivia knew the timeline. She knew it would activate during this morning's flight. She planned the whole thing. She insisted they fly to Lake Tahoe today specifically because the route crosses the Sierra Nevada. She said the crash site would be remote. The investigation would take weeks. And by then, Connor trailed off. By then, she and Adrian would be long gone with Edward's money. Robert finished. Connor nodded miserably. Robert stood and walked to the corner of the room, pulling out his phone. He texted Edward. "We have him. Full confession. Recording everything. It's worse than we thought. Adrian engineered the device personally." The response came within seconds. "Get it all on record. Every detail. I want them buried." Robert turned back to Connor. "Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell us everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every text message. We're going to record all of it. Then you're going to lead our team to that device and show them exactly what you did. And then you're going to testify. What about my sister? What about the people I owe money to?" "We'll handle it," Detective Williams said. "Witness protection can relocate her. And the people you owe, they're going to have bigger problems than chasing you for debts once we inform the FBI about their extortion racket." Connor looked between them, hope and terror warring on his face. "You can really protect her. If you cooperate fully, yes. But Connor," Robert's voice hardened, "if you're lying to us, if you're holding anything back, the deal's off. Understood?" "I understand. I'll tell you everything. I swear." For the next 2 hours, Connor Hayes told them everything. Every phone call, every meeting, every cold-blooded detail of the plot to murder Edward Harrington. They recorded it all, and by the time the sun rose over San Francisco, they had enough evidence to destroy Olivia Harrington and Adrian Pierce completely. Edward received the final text from Robert at 8:23 a.m. "It's done. We have everything we need. Connor's singing like a canary. The device is being removed from the jet now. Time to bring them in." Edward stood in his office, looking out at the city waking up below him. Somewhere out there, Olivia was probably getting ready, picking out the perfect outfit for the flight that would make her a widow and a multimillionaire. Not today. He picked up his phone and made a call. "Detective Chen, it's time. Bring them both in." Clara hadn't slept. She'd tried. After putting Lily to bed, she'd lain in the darkness staring at the water-stained ceiling of their tiny bedroom, listening to her daughter's soft breathing and the distant sound of traffic on the street below. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Olivia Harrington's cold smile, heard that terrible laugh, felt the weight of the decision she'd made, pressing down on her chest like a stone. What have I done? The digital clock on the nightstand blinked, 3:47 a.m. in angry red numbers. In a few hours, Lily would wake up for school. Clara would have to smile, make breakfast, pretend everything was fine. But nothing was fine. Nothing would ever be fine again. She'd told a billionaire that his wife was planning to murder him. She'd risked everything. Her job, her income, the fragile stability she'd fought so hard to build for Lily, on the hope that doing the right thing mattered, that honesty and courage counted for something in a world that had taught her the opposite lesson over and over again. Clara sat up carefully, trying not to wake Lily, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. Their apartment was small, just one bedroom, a cramped living room, and a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. The linoleum floor was cracked, the walls needed paint, and the radiator clanked and hissed like it was dying. But it was home. It was theirs. Or at least it had been. She filled a chipped mug with water and stood at the window, looking out at the sleeping neighborhood. Mrs. Martinez's window across the hall was dark. The bodega on the corner was shuttered. Everything was still, peaceful, unaware that Clara's entire world was crumbling. Edward Harrington had believed her. At least, he'd said he would investigate. But what did that mean? Would he confront his wife? Would he tell the hotel where the information came from? Would Olivia's lawyers come after Clara, accuse her of slander, destroy her reputation and her life? And if Edward didn't believe her, if he decided Clara was lying or crazy or trying to scam him somehow, she'd lose her job anyway. The hotel had strict policies. Staff didn't approach VIP guests. Staff didn't make wild accusations. Staff certainly didn't interrupt Edward Harrington's private moments to tell him his wife was a murderer. God, what was I thinking? Clara pressed her forehead against the cool glass. She thought of her grandmother, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 7. Grandma Rose had worked 3 jobs to keep Clara fed and clothed, had taught her that integrity mattered more than comfort, that doing right by people was worth any sacrifice. You look them in the eye, Clara girl. Grandma Rose used to say, her weathered hands cupping Clara's young face. You tell the truth even when it costs you, because at the end of the day, all you got is your word and your conscience. Don't sell either one cheap. Clara had held on to those words through everything, through losing her parents, through the foster homes before Grandma Rose took her in, through Grandma's death when Clara was 19, through meeting and losing David, Lily's father, to cancer 3 years ago. Those words had been her anchor, but right now, that anchor felt like it was dragging her under. She thought about Lily, sleeping peacefully in the next room, trusting that her mother would take care of her, protect her, keep her safe. What would happen when the eviction notice came because Clara couldn't pay rent? What would happen when Lily ran out of asthma medication because Clara lost her health insurance? You should have kept your mouth shut. You should have protected your daughter first. But even as the thought formed, Clara knew she couldn't have done anything differently, because what would she have told Lily later, when her daughter was old enough to understand? What kind of lesson would that have been? I let a man die because I was afraid. No, she couldn't live with that. She wouldn't. The sky was beginning to lighten, that deep blue-black of pre-dawn giving way to the first hints of gray. Clara checked the time. 5:03 a.m. In 5 hours, Edward Harrington was supposed to board that plane with his wife. In 5 hours, if Connor Hayes carried out the plan Clara had overheard, Edward would be dead. Unless he believed me. Unless he acted on what I told him. Clara pulled Edward's business card from where she'd hidden it in the sugar canister, the last place anyone would think to look in their sparse kitchen. She traced the embossed letters with her finger. Edward Harrington, CEO, Harrington Industries, and on the back, in neat handwriting, his private number. She could call. She could check if he was okay, if he'd done anything, if... No, he'd told her to go home. He'd told her he would handle it. Calling him now would just make things worse, would draw more attention to herself, would... A knock at the door made Clara jump so violently she nearly dropped the mug. Water sloshed onto her hand. Who would be knocking at 5 a.m.? Her heart hammering, Clara moved to the door and peered through the peephole. A man in a dark suit stood in the hallway, hands clasped in front of him. He looked professional, official. Behind him, just visible at the edge of the frame, was another figure. Oh God, it's Olivia's people, she found out. She knows. Clara's breath came in short, panicked gasps. Should she open the door? Should she pretend she wasn't home? Should she call the police? The man knocked again, softer this time. Ms. Dawson, my name is Robert Hale. I work for Edward Harrington. He asked me to check on you. You're not in any trouble. I just need to talk to you for a moment. Clara's hand trembled as she undid the chain lock and opened the door a crack. How did you find my address? Robert Hale had kind eyes. She noticed, tired, but kind. Hotel employment records. I apologize for the early hour and the intrusion, but Mr. Harrington wanted to make sure you were safe. Safe from what? May I come in? This conversation would be better held privately. Clara glanced back at the bedroom where Lily slept. Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door, to protect her daughter, But Edward had sent this man. That meant something, didn't it? She opened the door wider. My daughter's sleeping. Please keep your voice down. Robert stepped inside, and Clara saw the second figure more clearly now. A woman in a dark pantsuit, also professional, also carrying herself like security or law enforcement. This is Officer Patricia Mendez, Robert said quietly. She's here as a precaution. Mr. Harrington wanted to ensure you had protection in case... He paused. In case the situation escalated. Clara's legs felt weak. She sank into one of their 2 kitchen chairs. It's real then, what I heard. It's real. Yes, ma'am, it's very real. Robert pulled out the other chair and sat across from her. We've spent the last several hours investigating what you told Mr. Harrington. We've confirmed everything. Olivia Harrington and Adrian Pierce have been planning Edward's murder for weeks, possibly months. They paid the pilot, Connor Hayes, $500,000 to sabotage the jet. Clara felt the room tilt. She'd known. Of course she'd known. But hearing it confirmed, hearing that she'd been right, that a murder plot was real and not some nightmare her exhausted brain had conjured. We have Connor in custody, Robert continued. He's cooperating fully, giving us everything. The device he installed on the jet has been removed. Edward is safe. Thank God, Clara whispered. Tears burned her eyes. Thank God. You saved his life, Miss Dawson. If you hadn't spoken up, Edward would be dead in a few hours. You need to understand that. I just did what anyone would do. No. Robert's voice was firm but gentle. Most people would have stayed silent. Most people would have protected themselves first. You didn't. And that took extraordinary courage. Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What happens now? Now we arrest Olivia Harrington and Adrian Pierce. We've been watching them both all night. They don't know we're coming. They think everything's going according to plan. Robert leaned forward. But I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me. Do you feel safe right now? Is there anyone who might have seen you talking to Edward last night? Anyone who might connect you to this? Clara thought about the empty hotel lobby, the late hour, the way she'd kept her voice low. I don't think so. The lobby was pretty much empty, but the hotel has cameras everywhere. We've already handled the footage, Robert said. As far as anyone knows, you never spoke to Edward Harrington last night. Your conversation never happened. You can do that. When there's a credible threat against someone's life, and protecting a witness is paramount. Yes, we can do that. Robert stood. Officer Mendez is going to stay nearby for the next 24 hours, just as a precaution. If you need anything, if you feel unsafe for any reason, you call this number. He handed her a card. I have to work tonight, Clara said. My shift starts at 6. Actually, you don't, mister. Harrington has arranged for you to have the next week off. Paid. He called the hotel manager personally. As far as they're concerned, you're taking emergency family leave. Clara stared at him. He did what? He wanted to make sure you were protected. Ms. Dawson, and compensated for the risk you took. Robert moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Edward asked me to give you this. He handed her an envelope. Clara opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a handwritten note on heavy cream cardstock. Clara, I don't have adequate words to thank you for what you've done. You risked everything to save a stranger's life, and I will never forget that. Please accept the enclosed as a small token of my gratitude. You and Lily are safe. I give you my word. Edward, beneath the note was a check. Clara looked at the amount and nearly dropped it. $25,000. I can't, she started, but Robert was already shaking his head. Yes, you can, and you will. You did something remarkable, Ms. Dawson. Let yourself be rewarded for it. After Robert and Officer Mendez left, Clara sat at her kitchen table holding the check, watching the sun rise through the window. In the bedroom, Lily stirred and called out sleepily, Mama, I'm here. Baby, Clara called back, her voice thick with tears. Everything's okay. Mama's here. And for the first time in years, Clara thought that might actually be true. Olivia Harrington stood in front of her floor-length mirror, adjusting the collar of her cream silk blouse. She looked perfect, as always. Understated elegance. Nothing too flashy for a trip to Lake Tahoe. Just the grieving widow-to-be, preparing for what should have been a lovely weekend getaway. By tonight, she'd be free. She checked her phone. 8:47 a.m. Edward should be on his way home from the office by now. He'd texted her around 3 in the morning, saying he was working late on the merger deal. Typical. The man lived for his work, never noticing that his wife had stopped loving him years ago, if she'd ever loved him at all. Her phone buzzed, a text from Adrian. Everything ready on my end. Can't wait to celebrate tonight, my love. Olivia smiled and typed back. Soon, just a few more hours. She was slipping on her Louboutins when she heard the front door open downstairs. Edward was home, right on schedule. Darling, she called out, her voice the perfect pitch of wifely affection. I'm almost ready. We should leave for the airport in about 20 minutes. No response. Olivia frowned and walked to the top of the grand staircase. Edward stood in the foyer below, still wearing yesterday's suit. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes. But there was something else in his expression, something that made Olivia's stomach tighten with unease. Edward, are you all right? He looked up at her, and the coldness in his eyes sent a chill down her spine. We need to talk, Olivia, now. Of course, darling. But shouldn't we? Now. His voice was steel. In my study. Olivia descended the stairs carefully, her mind racing. Something was wrong. Edward never spoke to her like that. He was always controlled, always polite, even during their worst arguments. She followed him into his study, a wood-paneled room filled with leather-bound books and the smell of expensive scotch. Edward closed the door behind them and turned to face her. "Tell me about Adrian Pierce," he said quietly. Olivia's heart skipped a beat, but her face remained perfectly composed. She'd practiced this expression 1,000 times, slight confusion mixed with concern. "Adrian, your business partner. What about him?" "Don't." Edward's voice cut through her act like a knife. "Don't insult my intelligence. I know everything, Olivia, every single thing." For a moment, just a moment, Olivia's mask slipped, her eyes widened, and she took an involuntary step back. Then she recovered, smoothing her features back into innocence. "Edward, I don't know what you're talking about. You're exhausted. Maybe you should sit down." "Connor Hayes confessed," Edward said flatly. "He told us everything. The $500,000 Adrian paid him, the device he installed on the jet, the plan to make it look like an accident over the Sierra Nevada." He paused, letting the words sink in. "He told us how you approached him 6 weeks ago, how you and Adrian have been planning this for months." The color drained from Olivia's face. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's ridiculous. Connor is lying. He's probably trying to... We have the bank records, Olivia, the phone records, the text messages. We have everything. Edward's voice was eerily calm. "We know about the $50,000 you withdrew from your personal account. We know about every call you made to Adrian in the past 3 months. We know about your visits to Connor's apartment." Olivia stared at him, her mind desperately searching for an escape route, a story, an explanation. But there was nothing. The trap had already closed. "How?" she whispered. "How did you find out? Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Her voice was rising now, panic bleeding through. "Who told you? Who ruined everything?" "Someone braver than you'll ever understand," Edward said. "Someone who risked everything to do the right thing. Something you've never done in your entire life." Olivia's expression shifted then, the mask finally falling away completely. What remained was cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of remorse. "You know what? I'm glad you found out. I'm glad I don't have to pretend anymore," she laughed. That same terrible laugh Clara had heard in the hotel lobby. "Do you have any idea how exhausting it's been? 15 years of pretending to care about your boring business deals, your tedious charity events, your pathetic attempts at romance?" Edward flinched, but his voice remained steady. "So it's true. All of it. Every word." Olivia's eyes glittered with malice. "Adrian and I have been together for 3 years. 3 years of stolen moments while you were too busy building your precious empire to notice. He understands me, Edward. He makes me feel alive. You make me feel like expensive furniture. Beautiful, well-maintained, and utterly ignored unless there's a party to throw." "I gave you everything," Edward said quietly. "You gave me money," Olivia snapped. "Money and status and a gilded cage. But you never gave me yourself. You were always at the office, always traveling, always choosing work over me. So yes, I chose someone else. And yes, I decided that if I couldn't have happiness and freedom, I'd at least have your fortune. So, you decided to murder me. Don't be so dramatic. You would have died quickly. Painlessly, you wouldn't have even known what was happening." She tilted her head, studying him. "Really, I was being merciful. This way is so much messier. Divorce lawyers, public scandal, all that ugliness." Edward stared at his wife, this woman he'd shared a home with, shared a bed with, built a life with, and realized he'd never actually known her at all. The person standing in front of him was a stranger, a dangerous stranger. "You're sick," he said. "You need help." "I need freedom," Olivia corrected, "and $200 million. But I suppose I'll have to settle for just the freedom now." She reached for her Hermes handbag on the desk. "I assume you've already called the police." "They're outside." Olivia paused, her hand on the bag. Then she laughed again, a broken, desperate sound. "Of course they are. You always were thorough, Edward. It's one of the things I hated most about you." The study door opened, and Robert entered with Detective Chen and Detective Williams. Olivia Harrington, Chen said formally. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and solicitation of murder. You have the right to remain silent. I know my rights, Olivia snapped. She held out her wrists for the handcuffs, her chin high, refusing to show weakness even now. As Chen secured the cuffs, Olivia looked at Edward one last time. You know what the funny thing is? If you just paid attention to me, if you just loved me even a little bit, none of this would have happened. This is your fault as much as mine. No, Edward said quietly. This is entirely on you. I may have been a neglectful husband, Olivia, but you became a would-be murderer. Those aren't equivalent. We'll see what my lawyers say about that. As the detectives led Olivia toward the door, she called back over her shoulder. What about Adrian? Did you get him too? Or did he manage to escape? Robert smiled grimly. Adrian Pierce was arrested at his penthouse 45 minutes ago. He didn't go quietly. It took 3 officers to get the cuffs on him. Olivia's composure finally cracked. No, he was supposed to... She stopped herself, realizing she was about to incriminate them both further. He was supposed to what? Edward asked. Run, take the money and disappear. Leave you to face this alone. He shook his head. Adrian wasn't arrested because he was running. Olivia, he was arrested in bed with someone else. The color drained from Olivia's face. You're lying. I'm not. Ask the detectives. They have photos. Edward's voice was cold now. Turns out Adrian was hedging his bets. He had another girlfriend, a younger model. Literally, she's 23. He was planning to take half the money and leave you too. Olivia stood frozen, the truth sinking in. She'd been betrayed by the man she'd chosen over her husband, the man she'd been willing to kill for, the man who'd apparently been using her just as much as she'd been using Edward. You're all the same, she whispered. All of you, just users and liars. Get her out of here, Edward said quietly. The detectives led Olivia out. Edward could hear her expensive heels clicking against the marble floor, the sound growing fainter until the front door closed and silence fell over the house. Robert remained, standing awkwardly near the desk. You okay? Edward sank into his leather chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 45 years. I don't know. Ask me in a year. For what it's worth, you handled that well. You stayed calm. You didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing you break. I'm breaking now, Edward admitted. I just waited until she left. His phone buzzed. A text from Detective Chen. Adrian Pierce has been processed. Both suspects are being held without bail. Trial date will be set within the month. You're safe now, Mr. Harrington. Safe. The word felt hollow. Yes, he was alive. Yes, the plot had been stopped. But his life, the life he'd known, the marriage he'd believed in, even if it had been flawed, was gone. Destroyed by a woman he'd trusted and a partner he'd considered a friend. What happens to Clara Dawson? Edward asked suddenly. Robert raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean, I want to make sure she's taken care of, really taken care of. The check I sent was just the beginning. Edward stood and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens Olivia had designed 3 years ago. She saved my life, Robert. She risked everything for a stranger. I can't just give her money and forget about her. What did you have in mind? Edward was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned back to Robert. Find out what she needs, her daughter, her situation, everything, and then make sure she has it. Quietly, respectfully. I don't want her to feel like charity, but I want her to know that doing the right thing matters, that it's rewarded. Consider it done. After Robert left, Edward stood alone in his study, surrounded by the trappings of his success, the leather-bound books, the expensive furniture, the original artwork on the walls. He'd built an empire, amassed a fortune, achieved everything he'd set out to achieve, and none of it had mattered. A hotel server with calloused hands and a kind heart had saved his life. Maybe it was time to figure out what actually mattered. 3 days after the arrests, Clara stood in the waiting area of Harrington Tower, feeling completely out of place. The lobby was all polished marble and soaring glass, filled with people in expensive suits walking with purpose. She wore her best dress, a simple navy blue thing she'd bought at a thrift store 2 years ago, and clutched her purse like a life preserver. A receptionist had called her that morning. Mr. Harrington would like to meet with you, Miss Dawson, tomorrow at 2 p.m. if you're available. Clara had almost said no. The check Edward had sent had been more than enough, more than generous. She'd already paid 3 months' rent in advance, stocked up on Lily's medication, and even bought her daughter new shoes that actually fit. The last thing she wanted was to feel like she owed anyone anything, but something in the receptionist's voice, a kindness, a respect, had made her say yes. Now she was here, waiting, wondering what Edward Harrington could possibly want from her. Ms. Dawson, a young woman in a crisp gray suit approached. I'm Jennifer, Mr. Harrington's assistant. He's ready to see you now. Clara followed Jennifer into an elevator that moved so smoothly, she barely felt it rise. They stopped on the 42nd floor, and Jennifer led her down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than Clara's entire apartment building. Right through here, Jennifer said, opening a heavy wooden door. Edward Harrington's office was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of San Francisco, the bay glittering in the afternoon sun. But what struck Clara most was Edward himself. He stood by the windows, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city. When he turned to face her, Clara was shocked by how different he looked from that night in the hotel. The exhaustion was still there, the shadows under his eyes, but there was something else too. A softness maybe, a vulnerability. Clara, he said, and his voice was warm. Thank you for coming, please. Sit down. Clara perched on the edge of a leather chair that probably cost more than her car. Edward sat across from her, not behind his massive desk, but in the chair next to hers, like they were equals. How are you? He asked. How's Lily? We're good, really good. Clara's voice was steady despite her nervousness. The check you sent, Mr. Harrington, that was too much. You didn't have to. Please, call me Edward. And yes, I did have to. He leaned forward slightly. Clara, do you understand what you did? You saved my life. If you hadn't spoken up, I'd be dead right now. Olivia and Adrian would have gotten away with murder, and they'd be spending my money on some beach somewhere while my body was being pulled from a mountainside. Clara swallowed hard. She'd tried not to think about it in those terms, but hearing Edward say it made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I just did what anyone would do, she said quietly. No, Edward's voice was firm. Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Most people would have looked the other way, protected themselves. You risked your job, your livelihood, your daughter's security, all for a stranger. That's not common, Clara. That's extraordinary. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I couldn't let you die. I kept thinking about Lily, about what I'd want someone to do if it were me. And that's exactly why you're here. Edward stood and walked to his desk, picking up a folder. I asked you to come today because a check isn't enough. Money can't repay what you did, but I'd like to try to do something more meaningful. He handed her the folder. Clara opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a job offer letter. Administrative assistant, Harrington Industries, Clara read aloud. Her eyes widened as she scanned the details. Salary, $65,000 annually, with full health benefits, dental, vision, and a college fund for Lily. Keep reading, Edward said gently. Paid vacation, sick leave, retirement plan. Clara's voice broke. Edward, I don't have experience for this kind of position. I'm a high school graduate who's worked service jobs my whole life. I don't know anything about corporate administration. You'll learn. We'll train you. Edward sat back down. Clara, I've spent my entire career hiring people based on their resumes, their credentials, their connections. And you know what? Some of my worst hires were people with impressive degrees from prestigious schools. Some of my best employees were people who came from nothing and worked their way up. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I'm not offering you this job out of charity. I'm offering it because I've seen your character. You have integrity, courage, and compassion, qualities that can't be taught. Everything else, the technical skills, the procedures, that's easy. That's just training. Clara stared at the papers in her hands. $65,000 a year. She currently made less than half that working 2 jobs. With this salary, she could afford a real apartment. She could give Lily a stable home. She could stop living paycheck to paycheck. Stop choosing between rent and medication. Stop lying awake at night, terrified of the next emergency. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say yes. Edward smiled. and it was the first genuine smile Clara had seen from him. Say you'll take a chance on yourself. Say you'll let me thank you properly. But what if I'm not good at it? What if I let you down? Then we'll figure it out together. Clara, I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting effort and honesty. And based on what I've seen, you have both in abundance. Clara looked up at him, tears streaming down her face now. Why are you doing this, really? Edward was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Because for 15 years, I was married to someone who looked perfect on paper but was rotten underneath. Someone who smiled and lied and plotted my death. And then you, a woman I'd never met, a woman who had every reason to stay silent. You risked everything to save me. He paused. You restored my faith in humanity, Clara. You reminded me that goodness still exists in the world. This job, it's not charity. It's me saying thank you the only way I know how. Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She thought about Grandma Rose, about the lessons she'd taught, about doing the right thing even when it cost you, about integrity and courage. When would I start? She asked. Edward's face broke into a wide smile. How about next Monday? That gives you a week to sort out childcare. Get everything in order. Next Monday, Clara repeated, testing the words. A new job, a new life, a chance to give Lily everything she deserved. There's one more thing, Edward said, pulling another document from his desk. The college fund for Lily. It's already been established. Full tuition, room and board, books, everything she'll need when she's ready for university. It's in a trust, managed independently. Even if something happens to me or the company, that money is protected. Lily's education is guaranteed. Clara couldn't speak. She could only stare at the document, at the numbers that represented her daughter's future, secured and certain. I can't accept this, she finally managed. It's too much. The job is all ready. You can accept it, and you will. Edward's voice was gentle but firm. Clara, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Olivia tried to take it through murder. Adrian tried to steal it through betrayal. But you earned it through simple human decency. Let me use my wealth to do something good for once. Let me help the person who actually deserves it. Clara looked at this man. This billionaire who could have anyone working for him, who could have thanked her with a check and moved on with his life, and saw something she hadn't expected. She saw loneliness. She saw someone who'd been betrayed by the people closest to him, who was searching for something real in a world of facades. Okay, she said softly. I'll take the job, and I'll accept the college fund for Lily. But Edward, she met his eyes directly. You're not alone. You know that, right? What Olivia and Adrian did, that doesn't mean everyone is like them. Edward's expression softened. I'm starting to remember that, thanks to you. They talked for another hour. About the job, about the logistics, about Clara's concerns and Edward's expectations. But mostly they just talked about life, about loss, about starting over. Clara told him about David, about raising Lily alone, about the fear and love that drove every decision she made. Edward told her about the isolation of wealth, about building an empire while his personal life crumbled, about the wake-up call Clara's courage had given him. By the time Clara left Harrington Tower, the sun was setting over the bay, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She walked to the bus stop, but this time she wasn't exhausted. She wasn't afraid. She was hopeful. When she got home, Lily was waiting with Mrs. Martinez, working on homework at their small kitchen table. Mama, Lily jumped up and hugged her. How did it go? Clara knelt down and looked into her daughter's eyes. Those bright, trusting eyes that had kept her going through every dark moment. Baby, she said, voice thick with emotion. Everything's about to change, for the better, I promise. Because you were brave, Lily asked. Clara smiled through her tears. Yeah, sweetheart, because I was brave. That night, after Lily was asleep, Clara stood at their window looking out at the city lights. She thought about Edward Harrington, alone in his mansion, surrounded by luxury but starved for genuine connection. She thought about the job waiting for her, the opportunities ahead, the security she could finally offer Lily. But most of all, She thought about Grandma Rose's words. You tell the truth even when it costs you. It had almost cost Clara everything. Instead, it had given her a future. 3 months had passed since Clara started working at Harrington Industries, and she still felt like she was living someone else's life. Her new apartment had 2 bedrooms, a real bedroom for Lily, with space for a proper desk and bookshelves, and a bedroom for Clara that didn't double as the living room. There was a kitchen where she could actually cook without bumping into the refrigerator every time she turned around. The building had a courtyard where Lily could play safely, and the neighbors smiled when they passed in the hallways. But the biggest change wasn't the apartment or the salary, or even the health insurance that meant Lily's asthma medication was finally affordable. The biggest change was Clara herself. She sat at her desk on the 38th floor, reviewing expense reports with a competence that still surprised her. Jennifer, Edward's assistant, had been patient and thorough in training her. You're a natural, Jennifer had said just last week. You pick things up faster than anyone I've trained before. Clara didn't feel like a natural. She felt like she was constantly catching up, constantly proving she belonged. But she was getting there. Clara. Edward appeared at her office door. Not his office. Hers. A small space with a window overlooking the city, a real desk, and a nameplate that read, Clara Dawson, Administrative Assistant. Do you have a minute? Of course. Clara saved her work and gave him her full attention. Edward had changed too over these past months. The haunted look in his eyes had faded, replaced by something calmer. He smiled more easily now. He'd started leaving the office at reasonable hours instead of working until midnight. The betrayal had scarred him, Clara knew. But he was healing. I wanted to invite you to dinner, Edward said, leaning against the doorframe. Nothing fancy. I'm actually thinking of cooking for once, Lily too, of course. I'd like to meet her properly. Clara blinked, surprised. Over the past 3 months, she and Edward had developed an easy rapport. They had coffee together some mornings, discussing everything from work projects to books they'd read to their favorite spots in the city. But outside of work hours, they'd maintained a respectful distance. Clara had assumed that was how Edward wanted it. Professional boundaries, nothing more. You cook? She asked, deflecting while her mind raced. Edward laughed. I used to. Back before I had a chef and a wife who thought cooking was beneath her. I miss it, actually. There's something satisfying about creating something with your own hands. I know what you mean, Clara said. I taught Lily how to make my grandmother's chocolate chip cookies last weekend. She was so proud when they came out perfect. Then it's settled. This Saturday, if you're free, I'll make lasagna. Lily likes Italian food, right? Most kids do. She loves it. Clara hesitated. Edward, are you sure we don't want to impose? You're not imposing, I'm inviting. His expression grew serious. Clara, you're not just my employee. You're my friend. At least I hope you are. And I'd like to get to know the little girl who inspired such courage in her mother. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. We'd love to come. Saturday evening, Clara stood outside Edward's house in Pacific Heights with Lily's hand in hers, feeling nervous in a way she hadn't felt since her first day at work. Mama, this house is huge, Lily whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the 3-story Victorian mansion with its perfectly manicured garden and wrought iron gate. Remember what we talked about, Clara said gently. Mr. Harrington is a regular person, just like us. He just has a bigger house. And a fountain, Lily added, pointing at the elaborate water feature in the courtyard. We don't have a fountain. Clara smiled and rang the doorbell. Edward answered almost immediately, wearing jeans and a casual button-down shirt, the most relaxed Clara had ever seen him. Clara Lily, welcome. He crouched down to Lily's eye level. You must be Lily. Your mom has told me so much about you. I hear you're quite the artist. Lily, usually shy around strangers, seemed to sense Edward's genuine warmth. I like to draw, she said. Mama says I'm getting really good at horses. Horses are tricky, all those legs to get right. Edward stood and gestured them inside. Come on in. Dinner's almost ready. The house was beautiful, but less imposing than Clara had feared. Edward led them to a cozy kitchen that smelled amazing. Garlic, tomatoes, fresh bread. The formal dining room stood empty. Instead, he'd set a small breakfast table near the windows overlooking the garden. I thought we'd eat in here, Edward explained. The dining room feels too stuffy for a Saturday night. While Edward finished preparing dinner, Lily explored the kitchen with wide eyes, asking questions about everything. Why do you have 3 ovens? What's that machine do? Can I help? Edward answered each question patiently. And when Lily asked if she could help, he handed her a wooden spoon and let her stir the sauce while he sliced bread. Clara watched them together and felt something shift in her chest. Edward wasn't just being polite to her daughter. He genuinely seemed to enjoy Lily's company. Laughing at her jokes and listening carefully to her rambling stories about school, over dinner, conversation flowed easily. Lily told Edward about her art class and her best friend Maya, and the book she was reading about a girl who could talk to animals. Edward told Lily about learning to cook from his grandmother when he was young, about the first time he burned pasta so badly the pot was ruined. Mama burned toast last week, Lily announced. The smoke alarm went off and everything. Thanks for sharing that. Sweetheart, Clara said, laughing despite her embarrassment. Hey, I've burned toast too, Edward said conspiratorially to Lily. It's trickier than it looks. After dinner, Edward showed Lily his library, a 2-story room filled with books from floor to ceiling. Lily gasped when she saw the rolling ladder attached to the shelves. Can I try it? She asked breathlessly. If your mom says it's okay, Edward replied, glancing at Clara. Clara nodded, and for the next 20 minutes, she and Edward watched Lily carefully climb the ladder, running her fingers along book spines, completely enchanted. She's wonderful, Edward said quietly. You've raised an amazing kid, Clara. I've tried my best. Some days I feel like I'm barely holding it together, but then she does something kind or says something wise, and I think maybe I'm not completely screwing it up. You're not screwing it up at all. Edward turned to face her. Can I ask you something? Of course. That night at the hotel, what made you decide to tell me, really? You could have walked away. You had every reason to walk away. Clara was quiet for a moment, watching Lily carefully descend the ladder with a book clutched to her chest. I thought about my grandmother. She raised me on almost nothing, but she taught me that integrity matters, that doing the right thing matters, even when it costs you. She looked at Edward. And I thought about Lily. What kind of mother would I be if I taught her that staying safe was more important than saving a life? You're the bravest person I've ever met, Edward said softly. Clara shook her head. I'm not brave. I was terrified. I'm still terrified half the time, that I'll mess up at work, that this is all temporary, that I'll wake up and find out it was a dream. It's not a dream, and you're not going to mess up. You're doing incredible work. Clara, Jennifer told me you reorganized the entire filing system last week and caught 3 accounting errors that had been overlooked for months. Jennifer talks too much, Clara said, but she was smiling. She talks just enough. Edward paused. I want you to know something. This job, this opportunity, it's not charity, and it's not me paying off a debt. You've earned everything you have through hard work and talent. I know you still feel like you don't belong sometimes, but you do. You absolutely do. Before Clara could respond, Lily appeared beside them, clutching a leather-bound copy of Alice in Wonderland. Mr. Harrington, could you read me this? It looks old and special. That was my mother's copy, Edward said, his voice suddenly thick. She used to read it to me when I was about your age. He looked at Clara, who nodded. I'd be honored to read it to you, Lily. They settled on a comfortable couch in the library, Lily between Clara and Edward. As Edward read, his voice steady and warm, Clara felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. Maybe not since before David died. She glanced at Edward, this man who'd had every reason to become bitter and closed off after what Olivia and Adrian had done to him. Instead, he was reading Alice in Wonderland to an 8-year-old girl with genuine joy in his voice, and she glanced at Lily, whose eyes were heavy with sleep, leaning against Edward's arm like they'd known each other for years instead of hours. This wasn't the life Clara had planned. It wasn't the life she'd dreamed of. It was better. When Lily fell asleep halfway through chapter 3, Edward carefully closed the book. Should we wake her? Not yet, Clara whispered. She's comfortable. Let her rest a few more minutes. They sat in companionable silence, Lily sleeping between them, the library filled with the soft sound of her breathing. Thank you, Clara said finally, for dinner, for the books, for being so kind to Lily, for everything. Thank you, Edward replied. for reminding me that good people still exist, for teaching me that wealth isn't worth anything if you're surrounded by people who don't care about you." He smiled. "And for being brave enough to save a stranger's life." "We're not strangers anymore," Clara pointed out. "No," Edward agreed, his voice warm. "We're not." When Clara and Lily finally left that night, Lily clutching the Alice in Wonderland book that Edward insisted she borrow, Clara realized something had shifted between her and Edward. They weren't just employer and employee anymore. They weren't just two people connected by a moment of crisis. They were friends. And maybe, just maybe, they were becoming something more. The courtroom was packed. Clara sat in the back row, trying to make herself invisible among the journalists. Legal observers and curious onlookers who'd come to witness the trial of Olivia Harrington and Adrian Pierce. The case had dominated San Francisco headlines for months. Socialite's murder plot, billionaire's wife arrested, tech executive's deadly scheme. Edward had asked Clara not to come. "You don't need to be here," he'd said gently. "You've already done your part. Let the justice system do the rest." But Clara needed to see it through. She needed to know that her courage had meant something, that justice would actually be served. The trial had lasted 3 weeks. Clara had attended every day she could, sitting quietly in the back, watching as prosecutors laid out the evidence piece by piece. Connor Hayes had testified first, his voice shaking as he described how Olivia and Adrian had approached him, how they'd exploited his desperation, how they'd paid him to install a device that would kill Edward Harrington. "I was terrified," Connor had said on the stand, tears streaming down his face. "But I was more terrified of the people I owed money to. They threatened my sister. I thought I didn't have a choice." The defense attorneys had tried to paint Connor as the mastermind, claiming he'd acted alone and was now trying to shift blame to wealthy targets. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing transfers from Adrian's offshore accounts. Text messages between Olivia and Adrian discussing the problem that needed to be resolved. Phone records proving dozens of calls between the 3 conspirators. And most damning of all, the device itself, recovered from Edward's jet, with Adrian's fingerprints all over it. Today was the final day. The jury had deliberated for 6 hours before sending word that they'd reached a verdict. Clara watched as Olivia and Adrian were led into the courtroom. Olivia looked nothing like the polished socialite Clara had seen that night at the hotel. Her hair was pulled back severely, her face bare of makeup, her designer clothes replaced by a simple gray suit. But her expression was the same. Cold, calculating, unrepentant. Adrian sat beside her, looking haggard and defeated. The revelation that he'd been cheating on Olivia even while plotting murder with her had destroyed whatever alliance they'd had. They'd turned on each other during the trial, each trying to minimize their own role while maximizing the other's guilt. Edward sat in the front row with Robert and his legal team. Clara could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the armrest. This wasn't just about justice for him. It was about closure, about being able to move forward from the betrayal that had nearly cost him his life. "All rise," the bailiff announced as the judge entered. The courtroom fell silent as the jury filed in. Clara studied their faces, trying to read their expressions, but they were carefully neutral. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. The forewoman stood. She was an older woman, gray-haired and serious. "We have, Your Honor, in the case of the people versus Olivia Harrington, on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree. How do you find?" "Guilty," Clara heard someone gasp. Maybe it was her own breath catching in her throat. "On the charge of solicitation of murder. How do you find?" "Guilty." Olivia's face remained impassive, but Clara saw her hands clench into fists. "In the case of the people versus Adrian Pierce, on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree. How do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of solicitation of murder. How do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of attempted murder. How do you find?" "Guilty." Adrian's head dropped into his hands. Unlike Olivia, he seemed to crumble under the weight of the verdict. The judge thanked the jury and dismissed them, then turned to the defendants. "Sentencing will be held 2 weeks from today. Until then, both defendants will remain in custody without bail." As the bailiffs led Olivia and Adrian away, Olivia turned and scanned the courtroom. Her eyes landed on Edward, and for a moment, Clara saw something flicker across her face. regret, maybe, or just anger at being caught. Then Olivia's gaze swept past Edward and landed on Clara. Their eyes met for just a second. Clara didn't look away. She'd been invisible once. The hotel server Olivia had never noticed, but she wasn't invisible anymore. Olivia's expression hardened, and then she was gone, led through a side door toward the holding cells. The courtroom erupted in noise. Journalists rushing to file stories, spectators discussing the verdict, lawyers packing up their briefcases. Clara sat still, letting it all wash over her. It was done. Justice had been served. She felt a hand on her shoulder and looked up to find Edward standing beside her. His eyes were red-rimmed but clear. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being here, for everything. I needed to see it through," Clara replied. "Are you okay?" Edward sat down beside her as the courtroom slowly emptied around them. "I don't know. I should feel relieved, right? They're going to prison. They'll pay for what they did. But mostly, I just feel tired and sad. 15 years of my life with someone who wanted me dead. That wasn't your fault," Clara said firmly. "You didn't make Olivia who she is. You didn't drive Adrian to murder. They made those choices themselves. I know, intellectually. I know that. But emotionally," he shook his head, "it's going to take time." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Edward turned to her with something that might have been a smile. "Want to get out of here? I could use some air. What about the press conference? Your lawyers said." "My lawyers can handle it right now. I just want to be somewhere quiet with someone who actually gives a damn about me." They walked out through a side entrance, avoiding the media circus at the front of the courthouse. Edward's driver was waiting, and they climbed into the back of the town car. "Where to?" the driver asked. Edward looked at Clara. "Anywhere you want." "Golden Gate Park," Clara said. "There's a garden there Lily loves. It should be quiet this time of day." 20 minutes later, they walked through the Japanese tea garden, surrounded by sculpted trees and koi ponds. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow on the stone pathways. "I used to come here with my mother," Edward said, pausing at a small bridge overlooking a pond. "Before she died, before the business consumed my father, before life got complicated, we'd spend hours here, just walking and talking." "How old were you when she died?" 12. "Cancer like your husband." Edward looked at her. "Do you still miss him, David?" "Every day," Clara admitted. "But it's different now. The grief isn't as sharp. I can remember the good times without breaking down. I can imagine a future that doesn't include him without feeling guilty." "Is there someone in that future?" Edward asked. And something in his tone made Clara's heart beat faster. She turned to face him fully. Over the past months, their relationship had deepened in ways she hadn't expected. Coffee meetings that turned into long lunches, work discussions that became conversations about books, music, dreams, fears, the easy way Lily had folded Edward into their lives, and the gentle way he'd made space for them in his. "I don't know," Clara said honestly. 3 months ago, I was just trying to survive. I wasn't thinking about romance or relationships or anything beyond keeping Lily fed and healthy. But now, Edward prompted gently, "now I'm starting to think maybe there could be." Clara took a breath. "Edward, I don't want to complicate things. You're my employer, and you've done so much for me and Lily. I don't want you to think I expect anything more than—" "Clara." Edward stepped closer, his voice soft. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to just listen, okay?" She nodded. "When Olivia told me she'd been pretending for 15 years, I realized I'd been doing the same thing, pretending my marriage was fine, pretending I was happy, pretending that success and money could fill the emptiness inside me." He paused. "And then you came into my life. You, with your courage and your kindness, and your daughter's laugh. You showed me what real integrity looks like, what real love looks like, the way you love Lily, the way you'd sacrifice everything for someone else." Clara felt tears building behind her eyes. "These past 3 months have been the best of my life," Edward continued. "Not because of the trial or the justice, but because of you. Because every morning I get to have coffee with someone who sees me, really sees me, not my bank account or my status or what I can do for them. Just me. Edward, I'm falling in love with you, Clara. The words hung in the air between them. I know it's complicated. I know there's a power dynamic we need to be careful about. But I needed you to know. I needed to be honest because that's what you deserve. Complete honesty. Clara stood on the bridge, surrounded by the beauty of the garden, looking at this man who'd been through so much and was still brave enough to be vulnerable. I'm falling in love with you too, she said quietly. I have been for weeks, maybe longer, but I was afraid. Afraid you were just grateful. Afraid I was just a rebound. Afraid I'd lose everything if it didn't work out. You won't lose anything, Edward promised. Your job is yours regardless of what happens between us personally. If you want to explore this, explore us. We'll do it slowly, carefully, making sure Lily's comfortable every step of the way. And if you decide you don't want that, nothing changes. You're still my friend. You're still the person I trust most in the world. Clara reached out and took his hand. I want to explore it. I want to see where this goes. Edward smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Yeah. They stood there on the bridge, hands intertwined, as Koi swam in lazy circles below, and the afternoon sun painted everything gold. So what happens now? Clara asked. Now. Edward pulled her closer. Now we take it one day at a time. We figure it out together. We build something real. Something real, Clara echoed. I liked the sound of that. And when Edward leaned down and kissed her, gentle, tentative, full of promise, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not just hope for survival or getting through another day, but hope for genuine happiness. Hope for love. Hope for a future that was bigger and brighter than anything she'd dared to imagine. The garçonette from the midnight shift had saved a billionaire's life. But maybe, just maybe, he'd saved hers too. 1 year later, Clara stood in front of the full-length mirror in her new bedroom, adjusting the simple ivory dress that Jennifer had helped her choose 3 weeks ago. It wasn't a traditional wedding gown. Nothing elaborate or extravagant. Just a knee-length silk dress with delicate lace sleeves, elegant and understated. Exactly what Clara wanted. Mama, you look like a princess. Lily burst through the door, practically bouncing with excitement. She wore a pale pink dress and had flowers woven into her dark curls. At 9 years old, she'd grown taller, more confident, blooming under the stability and love that had transformed their lives. You think so? Clara turned, fighting back tears. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry before the ceremony, but that promise was already proving impossible to keep. The prettiest princess ever, Lily confirmed. Then, more seriously, are you nervous? A little, Clara admitted. Are you? This is a big change for both of us. Lily threw her arms around Clara's waist. I'm not nervous. I'm happy. Edward makes you smile the way Daddy used to, and he reads me stories and helps with my math homework and remembers that I don't like olives on my pizza. Clara laughed through her tears, hugging her daughter tight. He does remember that, doesn't he? And Mama. Lily looked up, her eyes serious. I know you worry about me, about whether I'm okay with you getting married again. But I am. I really, really am. Daddy would want you to be happy. And Edward makes you happy. Clara knelt down, taking Lily's hands in hers. How did you get so wise? You taught me, Lily said simply. You taught me that doing the right thing matters, that being brave matters, that love matters. She smiled. And loving Edward is the right thing, I can tell. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Martinez poked her head in, her eyes already misty. Clara, mihija, you look beautiful. It's almost time. Clara stood, taking one last look in the mirror. A year ago, she'd been a hotel server barely scraping by, terrified of losing everything. Now she stood in a beautiful home, about to marry a man who saw her, really saw her, and chose her not. Despite her past, but because of who she was, the past year had been a journey. After that day in the Japanese tea garden, she and Edward had taken things slowly. Dates after work, family dinners with Lily, long conversations about their fears and hopes. They'd gone to couples counseling. Edward's idea, wanting to make sure they built something healthy after his traumatic marriage to Olivia. The sentencing hearing had happened 2 weeks after the verdict. Olivia and Adrian had each received 15 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Connor Hayes, in exchange for his cooperation, had received a reduced sentence of 5 years. With the possibility of parole after 3, Clara had been there for the sentencing. Sitting beside Edward as the judge delivered his verdict, Olivia had shown no remorse. Even in the face of prison time, she'd looked at Edward one last time and said coldly, "I hope you're happy with your little charity case." Edward had squeezed Clara's hand and replied calmly, "I am. She's the best thing that ever happened to me." Those words had stayed with Clara through everything that followed. Through Edward's official proposal 3 months ago on the anniversary of the night she'd saved his life. Through planning this small, intimate wedding ceremony. Through building a life together that felt miraculous in its simple happiness. "Ready?" Mrs. Martinez asked, offering her arm. Clara took a deep breath. "Ready." The ceremony was held in the garden behind Edward's house. Their house now, Clara reminded herself. 50 guests sat in white chairs arranged in neat rows. No media, no strangers. Just the people who mattered most. Robert Hale stood as Edward's best man. Jennifer and Sarah Chen sat in the front row. A few close colleagues from Harrington Industries. And there, in the seat of honor, an empty chair with a single white rose. For David, for Grandma Rose, for the people who'd shaped them and couldn't be there to see this day. Lily walked down the aisle first, scattering rose petals with concentrated seriousness. Then Mrs. Martinez, giving Clara away since her own family was long gone. And then Clara saw Edward. He stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored navy suit. But what struck her wasn't his clothes or the setting or the flowers surrounding them. It was his expression. The way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world, like she hung the moon and stars, like she was precious beyond measure. This was real. This was happening. The ceremony was short and sweet. They'd written their own vows. Edward went first, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Clara, a 1.5 years ago, I thought I knew what my life was. I thought I had everything figured out, and then you showed me I'd been living in darkness, settling for a shadow of what life could be." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "You saved my life that night in the hotel, but you've saved me every day since, with your courage, your kindness, your unwavering integrity. You taught me that wealth isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in moments like this. In the laughter of a little girl reading in my library, in morning coffee with someone who truly knows you. You are my true wealth, Clara. Today and always." Clara's hands trembled as she began her own vows. "Edward, when I met you, I was invisible. I'd spent so long just trying to survive that I'd forgotten what it felt like to actually live. You saw me when no one else did, not just that night, but every day since. You saw my potential when I couldn't see it myself. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." She smiled through her tears. "You gave me security. Yes, you gave me opportunities I never dreamed of. But more than that, you gave me partnership. You gave me respect. You gave me love that wasn't about what I could do for you, but about who we could be together. You taught me that doing the right thing doesn't just matter. It can change everything. I love you, and I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you that you made the right choice in loving me back." The officiant smiled. "By the power vested in me by the state of California, I now pronounce you husband and wife, Edward. You may kiss your bride." Edward pulled Clara close and kissed her. Not the tentative kiss from the garden a year ago, but a kiss full of promise and certainty and joy. The guests erupted in applause. Lily cheered the loudest, jumping up and down. At the reception, under strings of lights as the sun set over San Francisco, Clara danced with her new husband while Lily spun in circles nearby, her pink dress flowing. "Happy," Edward murmured against her hair. "Impossibly happy," Clara replied. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life. Believe it. This is just the beginning, Clara. We have decades ahead of us. Decades of mornings and dinners and watching Lily grow up and building something real together." Robert approached with champagne, grinning. "A toast to the bravest woman I've ever met, and the man smart enough to recognize what a gift she is." They raised their glasses, and Robert continued, his voice carrying across the garden. "A 1.5 years ago, Clara Dawson risked everything to save a stranger's life. She had every reason to stay silent. financial insecurity, fear for her daughter, the very real danger of retaliation. But she spoke up anyway because it was the right thing to do. And in doing so, she didn't just save Edward's life, she saved his soul. She reminded all of us that integrity still matters, that courage still matters, that one person can make a difference. He raised his glass higher. To Clara and Edward, may your marriage be filled with the same courage, integrity, and love that brought you together. To Clara and Edward, the guests echoed. Later, as the evening grew late and stars emerged above them, Clara stood with Edward on the terrace overlooking the garden. Lily had fallen asleep in a chair, exhausted from dancing, and Mrs. Martinez had covered her with a shawl. "I've been thinking," Edward said quietly, "about that night at the hotel, about the moment you decided to tell me. What about it? I never asked. Did you know I'd believe you when you approached me, terrified and risking everything? Did you have any certainty that I wouldn't just dismiss you as crazy?" Clara was quiet for a moment, remembering, "No, I had no idea if you'd believe me. I just knew I had to try, that even if you thought I was insane, even if I lost everything, I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent." Edward turned to face her fully. "That's what I love most about you. You did the right thing without knowing it would work out. You had faith, not in me, not in the outcome, but in the principle itself, that doing good matters, regardless of the consequences. My grandmother taught me that." "Then your grandmother was a wise woman." Edward pulled Clara close. "I started something while you were getting ready this morning. A foundation. The Rose Dawson Foundation for Single Mothers, named after your grandmother. It'll provide job training, childcare assistance, emergency funds, everything women like you needed but couldn't access. We're funding it fully, and I want you to help run it if you want to." Clara stared at him, speechless. "Edward, you changed my life, Clara. Let's use our resources to change other lives too. Let's make sure other women don't have to choose between feeding their children and doing the right thing. Let's create a world where courage is rewarded, where integrity matters, where single mothers have the support they need." Clara threw her arms around him, crying openly now. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." They stood together on the terrace as the party continued below them, music and laughter drifting up into the night air. Lily slept peacefully, surrounded by people who loved her. Mrs. Martinez danced with Robert, both of them laughing. Jennifer took photos, capturing moments they'd treasure forever. "You know what the funny thing is?" Clara said quietly. "That night, I thought I was saving you, but really, we saved each other." Edward kissed her forehead. "No, love, you saved me. I'm just grateful you let me save you back." In the distance, San Francisco glittered like scattered diamonds. Somewhere in that city, other people were working late shifts, scraping by, choosing between rent and medication, feeling invisible and forgotten. But tomorrow, Clara would begin work on the foundation. Tomorrow, they'd start changing lives. Tonight, though, was for this, for love, for family, for the miraculous truth that sometimes, when you're brave enough to do the right thing, the universe rewards you beyond your wildest dreams. The hotel server from the midnight shift had become the guardian of a billionaire's renewed heart. And he had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or stock portfolios or mansion square footage. True wealth was measured in the courage of a woman who risked everything for a stranger. True wealth was the laughter of a daughter who felt safe and loved. True wealth was building a life with someone who saw you, really saw you, and chose you anyway. True wealth was this moment, right here, right now, and they were the richest people in the world.